There we go. No, that's fine. You can be Henry. You can be whoever you want. We're just glad that you're here. So I'm Kelly. I'm so happy to finally meet you, and I'm co-hosting with Ivana here, your purple girl.
Hi, Colleen.
Hi, thank you guys so much for having me.
Yeah, we were just talking about, we just got into a great conversation about intergenerational friendships and the benefit and just different phases of our lives. And it was so special. And so we can definitely see why this book has been so well received. It's been the Good Morning America Buzz pick and the Marie Claire book club pick and all the book clubs. And so I think this is going to be a perfect book club pick. So congratulations on this amazing release.
Thank you. It's been really fun. I'm so excited to be here.
We've all read the book, so we hope that this will be a spoiler-filled conversation. Like we want the behind the scenes things. And so we've all read it and loved it and are just so excited to hear from you more about it.
Perfect. Yay. It's so fun when I can do spoilers because it's a hard book to talk about with people who haven't read it because there's so many, twists and surprises that, I don't ever want to give anything away. So I'm glad everybody knows already.
Yeah, give it all away now. Yep, we're good. We are good. So if anyone has questions during the chat, feel free to type it in or just let us know, and we'll be sure to kick you over to Colleen to give you a chance to ask your question. But I'm just going to start us off, and I know that this story was inspired by your grandmother, and we were talking as our book club about how this made us miss our own grandmothers too. And so I think a lot of people will resonate with that in that way and just that connection. Can you talk a little bit more about your inspiration for the story and how this all came to be?
Yes, I love talking about this because it means I get to talk about my very favorite person on earth, who was my grandmother, Colleen Oakley. She and I just had a really special relationship, I'm sure, as some of you also do with your own, grandparents. She was that kind of doting grandmother when I was a kid that, of course, just spoiled me rotten, and I loved seeing her. But then as I grew older and matured into an adult, it turned into something else. Like I really just enjoyed talking to her. She was an excellent listener. She gave really good advice. She was very judgment-free. And she was super pragmatic. She was very funny, very, sharp and witty, which made her really fun to be around. And my grandmother had one rule when you went to visit her, and that was you could do kind of anything that you wanted during the day. But at 4 o'clock, you had to be at cocktail hour, much like Louise in the book. So a lot of my favorite memories of her are our whole family, sitting around the den or the living room, wherever we were gathered, and all the adults having cocktails and the kids having, hors d'oeuvres and like our lemonade or whatever, and just sharing all these stories. And she was a great storyteller. And about 5 years before she passed, she was diagnosed with late onset Parkinson's disease, which is a really tough disease for anybody knows who's had, any experience with it. But one of the reasons it's so difficult is all of the bevy of medications that doctors put you on to keep the symptoms of Parkinson's at bay. And they all have their own side effects. And for my grandmother, those side effects were very strong hallucinations and very vivid dreams when she was sleeping. And so she really started to struggle toward the end with telling what was real and what was not in life, which made our weekly phone calls a lot more interesting. And she started to say some really alarming and outrageous things. Like one time she asked me if I had sent a check for $10,000 for her to New Jersey. And I said, no, Grandma, I have not done that. What for? And she said, to pay off my gambling debts. And so my family and I started kind of sharing these stories, one, because she would have thought they were so funny herself, and two, because, I think humor is one of the best ways to deal with all the grief that we were experiencing. And so my novelist brain just started, turning the wheels. And I thought, what if any of these things that she was saying were actually true? Like, what if my grandmother, who had this really amazing life in her own right, had this other secret life that none of us knew about. And it was just starting to kind of come out and unravel at the end of her life. And so that's really when the character of Louise was born, who, as we all know, has her own secrets that her family is not aware of. And that was really just inspiration for it. And my grandmother, she passed in February of 2020, and that was right before I started writing this book. And I'd already had the idea and everything. But writing it was just so special because I infused Louise's character with a lot of my grandmother's, character traits and quirks and witticisms. And so it was really cathartic for me. It was part of my own grieving process, getting to feel like I was spending some time with my grandma again, which was really nice.
That is so special. I'm curious, now that your book has been out in the world, what does your family think too? Because this is a piece of somebody that they love too. And how has that been for them to read this?
Yes, it's been really fun for me as they read it. Of course, my mom and dad, read it way before it came out, and my brother and sister, and they all loved it and, they felt like they were spending a little time with grandma or could see her, in Louise. And then it's been so fun as my extended family has gotten to read it, because I just get these fun texts and emails, when they get to certain parts and they're like, Grandma. And so it's been great.
Well, and you're so lucky that you had her for that amount of time, because that wasn't too long ago, but
yeah,
it's never long enough, right?
Never long enough. Isn't that funny? Like, I was surprised. I wouldn't say necessarily surprised, but it is the natural turn of things, right? Like, somebody lives to their mid-90s and you're like, yeah, they had a really good run, but the grief was still just overwhelming. But I am super lucky in that, I always say this, in that I got to know her as an adult. I know a lot of people are not that lucky, and they lose their grandparents when they're kids, or even in their young 20s. And I feel like as you age, you come to appreciate finding out who the elders in your life really are, and not just who they are in relation to you. So she became so much more than my grandmother. Like, I really considered her a friend because I got to know so much about her personally, which I just feel really lucky to have done.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Well, that part of your writing, like your grandma, she just shines through these pages. Like, her character just leapt off the page, and I love that. Like, she's one that's gonna just stick with me for a while. It's just made a home in my heart, and I adored her. And your research process for that probably came a little bit easier than some other aspects of the story. What additional research did you do to make this story come to life?
Yeah, so I did a lot of research on second wave feminism, which was considered the 60s, 70s, all the way to the 80s, in our history. And I found out a lot of super interesting things. So for me, this book is really about, obviously, what it means to be a woman in the world in 2023 from the perspective of an 84-year-old and a 21-year-old. But I think it also is about, how far we've come as women in American culture, and also how far we have to go, right? So in my research, I found some things that were really surprising to me. And I think there's two great examples that kind of exemplify that theme. The first thing that I learned is that women were not allowed to open a credit card without their husband's signature or permission until 1974, which is crazy. I mean, that's really not that long ago.
No.
Yeah. And so I think that exemplifies how far we've come, right? Like, thank goodness we've got that far. And then another thing that I learned is the Forbes 500 list. The first woman did not make that list until, I think it was 1972. And that was Katharine Graham, when she took over the Washington Post. But I looked up because I was curious. This year, we had 40 women on the Forbes 500 list. So 40 out of 500, which granted is a whole lot better than one. But oh my gosh, like, how far do we still have to go, right? So that was really fascinating in my research. And then I, of course, did a lot of research on FBI and police protocol and cold cases and all of that was great fun. I had a lot of lawyer friends helping me. And then I have a friend that I went to high school with that works for the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. So he was quite helpful with some of those protocols.
That sounds like a fun investigative time that you had with this book.
Yes, I learned a lot.
Well, I was listening to your interview with Cindy Burnett from the Thoughts from a Page podcast, and you had mentioned, she had asked you if you're a pantser or a plotter as far as your writing process go, and you said you don't have this structured outline, like you just go with it. And I'm always flabbergasted by the authors that can do that. I'd love for you to talk more about how that goes for you and like how that works.
Yeah, it doesn't work well. I have to admit, I wish that I could be an outliner and a plotter. I wish that was my process, because I feel like it would not be easier. I mean, writing is hard, writing a book is hard no matter what you take, but I just feel like there's so many times that I write myself into corners or dead ends, and then I have to stop. And I have to go, oh gosh, I'm stuck. And then I have to go back and figure out where I got stuck or what's not working in my foundation or the first couple chapters, or, to figure out how to move forward. And so it makes for a lengthy drafting process. But, it's just the way that it works for me. This is my 5th book now, and I have tried other ways. I have tried to outline. It's just not my process. So I am at a point where I've accepted that that's not my process, even though I still wish it maybe was.
So did you know from the get-go, like, did you know the very ending and like how things were going to end? You just weren't sure how it was going to get there, or was it just a surprise all along?
I did, so I generally, when I come up with a story idea, it's typically while I'm finishing another book. And so I will let it marinate, and I sit on it for like 6 or 8 months, even before I'll write my first word. So by the time I write, I'm pretty familiar with my characters, where they're starting. Some of the twists have popped into my head, and then where we're ending up, or where I hope to end up. It doesn't always end up there. And then I'm just really, the writing is trying to figure out how to get from point A to point B. And so it's that messy middle that always gets me, but I get there eventually. So far anyway.
Well, I think that makes for really unique stories, too, if you're not sure how it's going to go. Like, it's not formulaic at all. And the other book I read of yours was The Invisible Husband of Frick Island. And I felt the same way, like just super unique and fresh and fun, and makes you think, and it's this perfect balance. So I think it's working for you.
Thank you. I really, really appreciate that compliment a lot, because it's what I try to do. Like, I liked to read books that are not predictable and not formulaic. And so those are the books that I'm drawn to write. And so when somebody sees that in my books, it means a lot to me. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. I think this is maybe my favorite question to ask, but are there plot points, major plot points, or like fun things that initially you started with that got changed in the editing process?
This is a really hard question for me to answer, because my writing process is so strange. So I edit as I go, which means I don't ever have like one of those completely messy first drafts where I have to go in and chop and rearrange and write a whole lot more. And so it's very hard for me to remember, what I cut out while I was doing it. So I don't think there's anything that sticks out that, would be surprising or interesting that I cut. I generally feel anything that I've cut, it's pretty a good thing that it's on the cutting room floor, as it were.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. So one of the aspects that we were talking about in book club, like I mentioned, was the intergenerational friendships, and how that was so special in this book, and how it's not often depicted in fiction. We mentioned a few books, like we kind of had a little running list of a few, but also really underrated in our society. And,
Yes.
People often, at least online, talk in a way that is not favorable about other generations, or there's a lot of memes or things, you know, poking fun at just generations and the way that people go about things. But you really just threw that all out the window, and Tanner and Louise were able to offer each other so much. I'm just wondering if you're able to talk a little bit more about how you got onto that theme and why it's important to you.
Yeah, so first of all, it was really, really important to me to show an 84-year-old woman that most people would consider elderly or past her prime or any of those unfavorable terms that we use, as a fully realized person, because you know, I think in our society and our culture, we don't revere people who are older. We certainly don't revere aging. We do anything we can to stop it, particularly as women. I mean, all of our beauty products are called anti-aging. And we don't have a lot of respect for the process at all. And so I really wanted to push back on that. And I wanted to show a woman, like, I think when we get a woman, even over the age of 45 or 50 in our TV, movies, books, like if we get that character at all, she's generally a trope, you know, a punchline. And so it was really important to me to show a character as her fully human self, you know, with desires and wants, and you know, she has not given up and just crawled off somewhere to die. You know what I mean? As I guess our culture seems to think that old people do or should do. And so that certainly was something that I was exploring and wanted to present. And then, yeah, that friendship, that age gap, because I think there's so much to learn from people who are different than you, whether it's age, race, gender. You know, because really at heart, all we want is human connection. If we can peel away those stereotypes and we can peel away those prejudgments, then we could find something to connect over. And I think Tanner and Louise did.
That's that, like, I feel like leads into what Wendy was just asking. I don't know, Wendy, if you want to ask your question about Tanner.
Oh, she said it's raining and noisy.
Oh. Well, she was wondering if Tanner was based on anybody that you know, because Louise is. So how about Tanner?
Yeah, Tanner really wasn't specifically based on anybody. You know, I started with her character kind of just the idea that she would be the antithesis to everything Louise is, not just in age, but, you know, obviously in demeanor. You know, Tanner's quite the rule follower, while Louise is more of the rebel rule breaker. And so that's really where I started with her and just let her character grow from there. I mean, you know, I was 21 once upon a time, although I don't remember it. It was a long time ago. I don't remember a lot of it, but I certainly, you know, delved back into, or tried to, that time period in my life that we've all been through, where, you know, 21 or early 20s, late teens is a tough time period, because you are trying to, especially as a woman, you're trying to figure out who you are as a woman, where you fit in, who you want to be in the world. And I think Tanner is at that place, but obviously she has had so much more thrown at her. So I was exploring a lot with her character. It was really fun to do her character arc, because she had so far to go, because she started from a really dark, you know, angry place, as it were.
That's for sure. She had some funny, witty comments herself too. Their banter was really, I like laughed out loud numerous times. Well, and then Shayna, do you want to ask your question?
I was just wondering, while you were writing it, if the characters did anything that really surprised you, because they kind of did a bunch of crazy things. So I wondered if you ever got something and you're like, oh, I didn't see that coming.
I'm sure they did. Let me think. Oh, when yes, I did not have Louise burning the letter and causing the fire alarm to go off. That all kind of came out of nowhere for me. I was like, you know, just thought Tanner was going to show up at the house, And then that kind of just came barreling out of me. And I thought that was a really fun scene because it sets up their relationship so well. Like it starts off on the worst foot ever, with Tanner having to leap over the fence and go around to the back. I'm sure there are some other things. I'll have to think about that. Sorry, I don't have them off the top of my head, but that's a great question. That does happen a lot when I'm writing. That they certainly do things that I don't expect or that I hadn't planned to write that day, but that's what makes it fun.
Well, and speaking of connections, Amy has a question too. I don't know, Amy, if you'd like to ask, or sure, her daughter's asleep, so I can ask. She says, you know, being from St. Louis, I love the scene with the Ark. And do you have any connection to St. Louis, or did you pick that part of their journey for a reason?
Yes, I'm so glad you asked that question because so my family and I have 4 kids. My husband and I have 4 kids. And about 4 or 5 years ago, we decided for some ungodly reason that we were going to drive to Denver from Atlanta on a family fun summer road trip to see my cousins. I have cousins out in Denver. So we did, and we made a lot of the stops that Tanner and Louise made, unbeknownst to me that I was going to end up writing this book, but it ended up working out really well. Well, one of the stops we made was in St. Louis, and it was just one of those stops that it was just kind of a calamity of errors, one after another. Like we stopped at this place for lunch and they didn't have air conditioning and all their waiters had quit. So we didn't know that. So we sat there for an hour, like sweating, waiting to get our food, and we never did and had to go to another restaurant. So it was just like all of these different things. And we had planned to go up in the Arch, but we were supposed to be at my brother and sister-in-law's house in Kansas City for dinner that evening. So we get in line with all intention of going up in the Arch, and the line was meandering and it was so long that when we got halfway through, my husband said, I really don't think we have time to do this because we're not going to make it to Kansas City until way past dinner if we stay. And I said, you're right. So here we are with 4 kids and we're scooting out of this. I mean, making the biggest chaotic mess, like just drawing everybody's attention as we're getting out of this line. And we finally make it and we head to the door and a security guard stops us. And he said, can I ask why you got out of line? And we said, yeah, it was just too long. And, you know, we have somewhere to be and we decided today's not the day for us. And he goes, well, I had to stop you because it looked like you got out of line when you saw the metal detectors. And I need to ask, do you have any weapons on you? And we were like, what? And obviously we didn't. And I think he could tell how shocked we were. And he said, said fine and let us go. But that clearly was the inspiration for Tanner and Louise's, own problems at the Arch.
Oh.
That's good for them at the Arch to be so careful. I mean, that they notice things like that. I wouldn't have thought, I definitely thought that was made up in the book.
Right. Yeah. And I guess that's their job. It's a reason they
Yeah.
have security guards.
Good to know, right? It's a safe place.
That's right.
Well, how fun for your kids to see, I don't know how old your kids are, but at some point to see their experiences come alive on the page. That's awesome.
Yeah, my oldest son is 13 and he has read the book and he really liked it and he thought that was very funny.
I love that. So we've touched a little bit on this, but what, in addition to like the intergenerational friendships, what do you hope that readers take away from this story?
Yeah, I love that question because honestly, I just want readers to have a whole lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
We are living through some pretty tumultuous times. Like real life can just be terrible sometimes. And if I can offer any reader an escape and a laugh and, just a, raucous good ride, then I feel like I have done my job as an author and I'm happy to do that. And if you take something else away, like maybe it makes you, want to go strike up a conversation with your neighbor who's 85 and lives alone, then that would be awesome too.
Mm-hmm. That's really great. Yeah, mission accomplished. Definitely. Have there been any fun moments for you as the book has been released and out in the world? Like any highlights since its book birthday?
Good Morning America was probably my biggest highlight. That still feels very surreal for me. I was fortunate enough to be with my family when we got to watch it all on TV, my extended family, my parents, my sister, and knowing like when they showed that the book and my video was being shown in Times Square, that like blew my mind, because I used to live in New York and used to walk by Times Square all the time. And that was really ridiculously exciting. Like, it's still exciting. I still beam about it. It was really fun.
Oh, how cool that it came full circle for you just living there. And how far in advance did you know that it was going to be the GMA Buzz Pick? Like, did you have to keep this under wraps for a while? Like, you couldn't?
I did. I think it was about 5 or 6 weeks. And then I had to send in the video that they showed like 2 weeks before. And listen, you might think that you make your husband or whoever retake photos of you 100 times. You have never seen. I probably took 40 tries of that video to make sure. I was like, this is going on Good Morning America, so it has to be perfect.
Oh, I'm sure he was a trooper. Let's see. Rebecca in the comments says, you mentioned how we don't talk nicely about other generations today on social media. I adored this book because I grew up in the 70s and we had elderly buddies in school, and I fell in love with the process. My lady was so fun that I requested a man too. We made paper flowers and sang and talked about life. And this just brought it all back. I hadn't thought about those experiences in 40 years. Thank you.
That's amazing. And why don't we do that anymore? Hopefully they do that somewhere in America. They don't do it at my kids' school.
No.
That's incredible.
That's
incredible. There's maybe you guys have seen this like news story. It makes the rounds every couple months on Facebook. But it's, I think, in Denmark, where they build assisted living homes right next to preschools or daycares. Yeah. And then they have, play dates and arrange social visits. And I just think that's so important. Like, I wish that we did more of that or encouraged more of that in our culture.
Yeah, I brought that up in our book club. I'm in West Michigan, and there is a local daycare that is paired with an assisted living facility. And it's like the sweetest little partnership, and I love it. Oh yeah, and Janice says our pre-K meets with assisted living. They have buddies. Oh, this is like what our world needs more of.
Yes, we need so much more of this. Like, wouldn't the world just be a better place if everyone did that?
Yes. Well, I know that you want to just enjoy and soak in the moment of this book being, out now, but are you able to share about what you're working on next, or is your mind in that space yet?
Yeah, I love talking about it. So I'm about 3/4 of the way done with my new book, and it is about, I can't say too much about it, but it's about a couple who's been married for 19 years, and they're on the brink of divorce, and they end up going to a 3-star Michelin restaurant that's very isolated on this cliff in California. And the night that they're at dinner, an underground eco-terrorist group bursts into the restaurant and takes the entire restaurant hostage. And it's called Jane and Dan at the End of the World.
Oh. So is this a thriller, or is it kind of a more of a lighthearted mystery, or
more of like a dark comedy? Like,
yeah,
quirky. So same kind of humor tone as Tanner and Louise and Frick Island. Maybe a touch darker because there's a little terrorism involved, but definitely a lot of humor.
How do you come up with your titles? They're also, I feel like they're so different. And
thanks. So titles I love doing, and I think it's because of my journalism days when I, as an editor, wrote 8,000 headlines. Like, I just really like encapsulating a story as best I can. And I also am one of those strange writers where I usually come up with the title very, very early on, because that's what makes it feel like a real book to me. And it always gives me kind of that North Star of what I'm writing toward. So I've never had a title change. Like, the title that I come up with when I sit down to write a book is always the title that it ends up being, which is unusual.
Yeah, we've heard from a lot of authors that they just work on this book for so long without a title, or they have one and then the publishers go with something different. But that's amazing. Yeah, really not.
I mean, this title might change. Who knows? This might be my first one, but that is part of my process, and so far that's how it's been.
That's really cool. Well, our last
Ooh.
question. Oh, sorry. Go ahead,
No, I
Ivana.
was just gonna say, do we know when to keep our eyes open for this? Is it next year?
So it'll be spring 2025. I'm on a every like 1.5 to 2 year
Gotcha.
publishing schedule.
Gotcha. Awesome.
That's great. Okay, last question before we let you go. Any recent favorite reads or authors that you've been enjoying?
Yes, so many. How much time do we have left?
It's 8:30, so we don't want to keep you too long, but you can share.
I mean, I could go on and on for about an hour with these, but I'll keep it to my top maybe 3. So I loved Rebecca Mackay's I Have Some Questions for You. I thought that was brilliant. I loved Notes on an Execution by Dania Kukafka, I think her name is. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. That was amazing. And then the other one I can't stop recommending is The Woman with the Cure by Lynn Cullen, which is a historical fiction. She is an incredible author. She has a whole backlist where she finds those women in history that we seldom hear about or know nothing about that are actually super integral to something very important. So in The Woman with the Cure, it's about the female scientist who was very integral in finding the polio vaccine. And of course, who knew a woman was involved? We only hear about Salk and Jonas. And so that was super interesting and so well done. So highly recommend that one.
Fun. Well, this is our plug for if you liked Notes on an Execution, you have to pick up The Quiet Tenant by Clemence Michelin, and it comes out, it's June, right? Yeah, and we're meeting with her in July, but it's got total Notes on an Execution vibes. Like, I feel like it's a different story, but kind of told in a similar structure.
Okay.
So it's so good. So I think you would like that one too.
Yay. Thank you for the rec. I will definitely look into that one.
Yeah. Okay, Ivana, can we snap our picture?
Yeah, if people have their books with them, we love to take a picture at the end of our, chat so that we can, post it and keep reminding people to read your books. And yeah. Okay,
also, I wanted to do a shout out really quick to Hashita. She's in India and it's like 5 a.m. her time, right?
Oh my gosh.
Yes,
yeah. I know. I always feel like we have to remember to mention that because that's just amazing. That
is amazing. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you get to go back to bed after this.
Yes.
Yeah, she's so sweet to join. So I always have to call her out just so you know that we're tuning in from all over the place. So
that's incredible.
I love it. So no big deal if you don't have a book, but we can all smile. I'll say 1, 2, 3, and then I'll snap a photo. Okay, 1, 2, 3. There we go.
Awesome. Well, Colleen, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us. And this book was delightful, and it's just such a gift for you to be sharing your talents and time with us. So thank you so much.
Thank you. The honor was completely all mine. Thank you so much for choosing the book and being so enthusiastic about it. And thank you to everyone for reading it. I appreciate it.
All right. We'll be looking forward to whatever comes next from you. Spring 2025. We're ready.
Thank you. I'll talk to you soon.
Bye, Colleen. Thank you.
Bye.
All right. I'm going to stop the recording before I forget.